All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Happy Hour. Mike, what's going on?
Derek, we are in the midst of a legend, so we should probably start with introductions because there's a lot of listeners that are from outside of Buffalo, and this is a treat. So, sir, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll start with basically interrogating you on your history and your overall impact for the city of Buffalo.
Okay, I am Vic CARUCCI, and I cover the Bills and the NFL for the Buffalo News. I've covered the NFL for 42, I believe I just finished 42 seasons.
Wow.
Of doing that, just that particular league and sport. And have worked for several different papers, but beyond the news, I say several, a few. It started out in Utica, New York, where I was born in that area, suburban Utica, and started there covering high schools, auto racing, all the stuff that a person would be willing to do for $7.50 a story. That's
wow.
what I was paid back then, and I thought I was the richest guy in the world, and for me, more valuable than the byline than the 750 was seeing a byline and seeing how the editors rewrote everything I had scrawled on a legal pad for my stories, because I didn't quite know how to type yet when I was in my early teens trying to work my way into this business on a part-time basis. Camden Courier-Post, which is out in South Jersey, outside of Camden, New Jersey. That's where I got the big break of covering major college sports, the NFL. I was covering the Philadelphia Eagles. That was when Ron Jaworski played for the Eagles. Dick Vermeil was their coach. Herman Edwards was a cornerback for that team. So that was the opportunity to break into the NFL, and I was nowhere near ready for that. But some dude left the beat suddenly and left them hanging. They needed somebody, and I was hired to cover major college sports, and I was more than happy with that. I was covering Penn State, and I was covered Villanova when Howie Long was playing at Villanova. They were a D1 program back in the day. My beat also included the University of Maryland. It was an odd thing, but I was doing it the Gannett company owned that paper, and they had me covering colleges on a regional/national basis. I did like a national column for the Gannett News Service. And then, as I said, the Eagles beat open, and I said, sure, I can do that, and I'll do them both. I'm single, and I'm insane, and I would cover a college game on a Saturday and get to an Eagles game on Sunday. I guess, I must have covered an Eagles. I know I did. I covered an Eagles-Bills game somewhere along the line, but I was covering the Eagles, and I was young enough that it wouldn't have killed. Today, it would kill me.
Sure.
Then it didn't. At least I don't think it hurt me too badly. But I was operating on very little sleep, a lot of caffeine. And then the Buffalo News hires me in '82.
So what did you always want to do this? Like, what was your aspirations in school? Did you want to do something else? Did you go to college for this? What was your path like that?
So my path was, I fell in love. The first love I had from a sports standpoint, and I liked all sports, and we played them all as a kid, but football became ingrained in me, and I was that 70s younger. I mean, I was a 60s child, but it was late 60s, 70s that the NFL became not what it is now, but started to dominate the landscape, at least from a TV standpoint. And I was the guy who was in front of his TV every Sunday and pretending to be. And then when we'd go out in the backyard or playground, your favorite players. And I had this passion, and I grew up, even though I grew up in Central New York, my team was the Los Angeles Rams. I just because all my friends loved the New York Giants primarily, and rooted for the East Coast teams. Some like the Jets, but they weren't all that popular. There was really little interest in the Bills. Then they weren't very good back in the day, or the AFL just didn't catch on there in Central New York the way it did, obviously here and in other AFL cities. So I was this big Rams fan, and I just found myself gravitating more to the game. Like I wanted to be a part of it, and I knew my limits as an athlete. I certainly gave it my best to try to play it, but to play it at a level that I could stay involved with it in a something longer than either junior high school, whatever, I knew was not going to happen. So I decided, well, what else could get me close to this game? And coaching became a very big part of that thought process. I studied, I pulled out a lot of books. I was the kind of guy who would go to the library, study a subject, ask questions, talked with the head. I was very close with our coaches at the high school, my high school, and would talk strategy with them and so forth, and ask them about coaching and what it entailed, and it seemed like a possibility, and it was fascinating to me, the strategy, especially the teaching element of it. But then it somewhere along the line, I thought I saw this sports writing idea, I never really connect, even though I would read sports, I didn't realize what it involved and and that you could be very close covering the games. And there was no ESPN. So the broadcast part, there was radio play-by-play, but that wasn't really the thing. The thing was, if you were going to be close to sports in my case, wanting to be close to the NFL, sports writing was the avenue. So I pursued that to the fullest and realized that involved something. At that point, my skills as a writer, English classes, and again, I was so fortunate. There were English teachers who understood. I communicated to them what I wanted to do, and they communicated to me in no uncertain terms. Hey, if you're going to do this, you've got to be proficient in writing and reading, especially. And a teacher to Mrs. Jackson, way. If you're going to be a good writer, you have to be a great reader. And again, those were shortcomings for me. So I met that she used the sports writing thing as an incentive. You want to get here, and you got to do this. So, and the student newspaper also involved, you had to have at least a B average to be on the staff. That was the requirement. I don't know how it was written into the school bylaws then, but I'd probably never fly now. But then it was a thing. If there are still student newspapers, I guess. But anyway, so I aspired to do that and elevate my grades, and actually surpassed that, and was averaging somewhere in that B plus range. So I was a A- B plus student, and working on my skills as a writer, and having her just be as tough as could be on me and then she was the advisor, and that's how it started. And then I thought, oh my God, I want to be the sports editor of the student paper, and everybody's going to want that job. Well, it turned out that those who were interested in student newspapers weren't that interested in sports. So I was fortunate. I was pretty much the only one who could. So not only did I write my own copy, I also illustrated, did some illustrations of different sports action scenes. Anyway, it worked from there to getting that part-time opportunity, and then understanding that studying journalism would be the way to go. So that it would happen in Utica as well, Utica College, and pursued all that. And at a time when it wasn't what it was. How can I put it? I think I was sort of like pursuing an old school idea. Even now, I know now it doesn't have that same. There was a time when people would tell me, if you're not into ESPN or whatever, the young people, I'd speak at classes and whatever, sports writing. Wow, what's that? Of course, it's turned into blogging. It's turned into a million other things that involve the written word of some sort, but mostly it's got elements far different than the print ink stain retch thing that I was a part of, where you hold the paper and have ink all over your hands. But that appealed to me. There was something romantic about that. And then you had the whole Woodward and Bernstein, all the President's Men, and that made it sexy in the 70s. That's when it really exploded, and that's when journalism schools started to see just all kinds of interest. And right, people would flood to that. So I was slightly ahead of that curve, but I realized it was me. It was the calling, and I also understood that I couldn't just excel at sports writing. That if you're going to be a journalist means you can write about anything. You can cover any story, and that was something I learned through, again, school, through some great professors, some great journalists, old school and some new school people that mentored me along the way at all my different stops. And it was actually a requirement in the first couple of places I worked that you had to do other beats besides the sports beat. You had to cover courts, cover school board meeting, cover the weather, write about the weather. And I felt that was valuable. Now, I mean, at the time I said, why am I doing this? I just want to be in a press box cover. But I was thankful years later that I had that opportunity. And again, I realized that, it makes you well-rounded.
Sure.
And so that's what all that went into it. And it pretty much was fulfilling a dream, but it involved, before I ever got to the NFL, I covered high schools, I covered auto racing, I covered boxing, you name it, track and field. You sit there and take scores over the phone, with the phone on your ear like this, and you're typing away and typing on a typewriter. Right?
Yeah.
A typewriter, okay. And so the technology, I saw all that evolve through the years, and I saw the business evolve, and it's been an interesting ride to just see where it is in 2021 versus where it was, say, in the mid to late 70s when I really started to get into it and professionally.
Sure.
Now, I'm sure it's just like everything else where you become more comfortable. Like, in today's day and age, you just go to the stadium and then you know exactly where to park, you know where to walk, you know who to talk to, how to get through the security and things. But when you first started and you were doing the beat outside of sports, I mean, when you were green in the industry, what was that experience like when you're like, okay, I now have to go to some random courthouse and write about a case I basically I really don't know anything about? Was that just like you have a media badge and you're like, I'm here for the news, and then the facility took over, or was it like all on you to learn?
It pretty much was on me to learn, and I'll give you I'm so glad you used that courtroom example, because there was a player for the Bills. You guys, you'll know the name, probably Joe Cribbs, if that rings a bell.
Yeah.
If you're really up on the Bills, you know that history. So there was a story when he played for the Bills, and then he was signed by the United States Football League, and there was a battle between the NFL and the USFL, of course. And Joe was there was an issue over the rights. The Bills were challenging whether he could be signed by the Houston Gamblers football team, which was owned by a dentist, a former, or I guess he was, I don't know if he was a former or current dentist. His name was Dr. Jerry Argovitz. And it was a kind of a famous case, and the Bills actually didn't. The contract, the short of it is that they didn't protect themselves against that league. I guess they were protected against the Canadian Football League invasion of rights of a player, but it went to court, and it went to a U.S. District Court in Buffalo, and I was assigned to cover that, and it was really my first opportunity to get into the courtroom and kind of know. And I asked a lot of questions. That was the thing. I talked with our court reporters. I again did the old library thing, pulled out books, and tried to understand what was involved, and talked to some friends I knew who in the legal community in Buffalo to just get their feel for it. Give me opinions on what exactly and what I was in for relative to covering it. I asked all those procedural questions of our court reporters. It wasn't all that difficult. In fact, it was less formal doing that than going into a press box where, and I think of what it is now. You go through those metal detectors, your whole, and I mean pre-COVID, you're going through.
Right.
I guess post 9/11, pre-COVID, it's an effort to get in and go through the security. Even when the security guys know you. Right. They're patting you down. But anyway.
Well, there's that Baker commercial that does that where he's walking in and they're like, dude, you know me. And he's like, I got a Baker. I'm sorry.
That's not a joke. The courtroom thing was interesting to listen and also cover it a different way. It helped me with the emotional element of it. And what I mean by that is I've tried to teach this to younger folks. because I had to learn it myself. Be dispassionate, remove the emotion from the coverage, because you're not doing yourself, but especially your affiliate, your employer, or your readers, especially, any favors if you are emotionally involved in any possible way to that game, good or bad. If you go into that with a rooting sense, or a sense of that you could have the opposite of that, be really frustrated and angry, act the way a fan would normally react to a bad situation, to watching its team not do well, or feel they're being cheated by the officials, or that the other team is doing something illegal, whatever. If you let that seep into your thinking, your view, it will seep into your writing.
Right.
And I always feel that that's the worst thing that you could say. The worst. It's not a good thing.
Sure.
I'm sure there are worse things, but it's high on my list of the not to do's.
Sure.
Or what you don't, of the don'ts. Don't be the dispassionate guy. And a lot of people can't understand it. Well, you're covering the Bills, or you were covering the Eagles. You got to be a fan. You cover for the fans. Who's reading what you're writing?
Right.
Fans of that team. Well, they are, but I respect them enough that they would hope that what I present to them is got no filters on it. That it's my view, my sense of what's happening. And you still can disagree with me in any way. I mean, in fact, I hope I'm making you think, rather, and whether you love it or hate it, if you read it, I win. That's always been my goal.
Good point.
And it's always about making it. And here's the other thing. What I do root for, one thing and one thing only for every game: the best story. So for this past Super Bowl, what was the best story? I got it. I mean, if anyone thought it was anything other than Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl, his seventh, with a different team, 1 year after he leaves the team for 20 years. And for Buffalo readers, I know it drove them crazy to even think that they care about that, but guess what? They care.
Right.
And that was the story, and I rooted for that. I would have been happy to write about Patrick Mahomes winning back-to-back with the Chiefs. To me, less interesting than Brady doing what he did, but obviously you let it play out and see what happens.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mention your professors and all the due diligence you did in your writing and making sure that your punctuation was correct and things, and then now you're so focused on removing how you feel about something. And when we first started communicating via email, we were both shaking. Like, how do we start this conversation? Like, what do we even say? And then I'm sitting there like, well, hold on. Like, I'm typing, so you have to, like, don't speak. Like, you need to give me 45 seconds because I have to make sure that my punctuation's correct. I don't look like I'm totally off the wall. And then when I hit send, I immediately started sweating. I'm like, well, I hope he likes it. Like, I don't know what to do. So I feel you.
It was totally fine. And to this day, I'm talking about myself. I mean, I'll be my harshest critic and try to read. Again, time is never a friend. I won't say often not a friend. It's never a friend.
Yeah.
In this business, when you're trying to get it out there and get it done. But I want it to be right. I mean, not just factually first and foremost, and that gets lost too often today. And I'll sound like the old cranky back in my day. We checked things 15 times, but there is value in doing that because your credibility is on the line. And as far as the structure and the writing, you'd be surprised if the person I think about is the late Mrs. Jackson or the late Mrs. Starnes or those teachers who I knew were their red pens all over my work, or fast forwarding it to having had the opportunity to write professionally, but editors with whom I worked at different places, especially book editors. And I was able to, fortunate to do 10 books, 10 or 11, whatever it's been, and work with editors from Simon & Schuster and Doubleday and Random House and HarperCollins. They don't play when it comes to editing, and they will. And when you see a line and the margins, and now everything's electronically done. But when I would write books, the manuscript would be about this thick with 8.5 by 11 paper, and you'd see in red, this page is bloodless. It's, oh God, I mean, you see something like that, you just want to just die. You just want to say, so that's, in other words, this editor who I don't know, it wasn't the guy that, but the editor who, I worked with an editor who worked on the book Marley and Me, and who hated dogs, by the way. There's a little side. Till he got that manuscript, and ended up crying when it was over, like we all did. But I realized that's some pressure. And that's just one of his credentials, that he edited that book, and now he's going to edit a football book.
Sure.
And so your self-editing becomes a thing. And to the point that you made about how I might react, and by the way, fine, your emails were wonderful. But I did have an opportunity in this business to be an editor, work for my stint with the Cleveland Browns involved, and NFL.com, but the Browns especially, working on their internal media. And when you'd post a job and have and human resources would forward you all these emails or resumes and cover letters, and it was easy to eliminate because the job involved writing, it involved communicating, and if I saw that you were a poor communicator with the written word, with your spoken word, whatever it might be, it was easy to eliminate.
Right.
And I tried to. So having two daughters of my own, who I'm blessed, they've gone on and done tremendous things professionally. But so we had a little joke with both are Niagara University grads, and they're 4 years apart. So it was eight consecutive years of tuition.
Perfect.
Niagara. I got a little scholarship help, but I had a lot of it came out of this pocket. So and I'm darn proud because they did tremendously well. But the joke was my older daughter, Kristen, would tell her younger sister, Lindsay, you better let Dad read your papers because Dad is good for at least one grade point or maybe a grade point and a half better after he edits it, because I could just clean it up. I didn't rewrite it. I just would make my edits. And so that would be our thing, like getting, and it kept, in many ways, I felt like I was going to school with them. It was kind of a fun thing.
That's awesome. Ride. So we got to talk about the current bill situation and kind of what's been happening in the past couple of years. So at what point, being a journalist, do you report on rumors or thoughts without the league? Because I believe last year we didn't hear too much about Diggs coming to Buffalo. We actually heard more about it the year prior to that. With the whole Minnesota Vikings wanting to trade him and everything. And this year, J.J. Watt gets released by the Texans, and Bills fans are drawing lines. He had a blue heart and a red heart in one of his tweets, so it must mean he's coming to Buffalo. His wife's eating wings. So at what point, being a journalist, do you actually report on some of this stuff, or do you ever let things slip under the rug?
Well, no, I mean, this commands attention. The story commands attention, period, because for this very simple reason. It's been identified, edge rusher, pass rusher, as a top need. I think it's the most pressing need for the team. However they go about addressing it, whether it's the draft or free agency, I think, I'd be inclined to think it's more of a draft pick idea, but this was, remember, Watt is different than, say, a Shaq Barrett from the Buccaneers entering free agency or a Bud Dupree. Because I think the market for those players is likely to be higher. There are more, they're younger and presumably healthier players, although Dupree was hurt. But to the degree that you're talking about Watt as a veteran, and I think he's into this market now and available. Of course, the conversation is going to start, be out there, I should say, to the extent that, okay, do you kick the tires on this guy? Well, yeah, it makes sense. And we've seen those reports that they're among the teams. And I would be shocked if they weren't among, a half dozen or so teams. I would think that, Watt, his representation would have interest pretty much everywhere to goal number one, keep his standard contractually as high as he can keep it. I think it's going to be a challenge, as a free agent. And again, the years and the injuries and all those, but he is worth the fit. I think would be excellent as a character fit, as the type of player person. You know the whole Sean McDermott program. You know the need is there. How much do you get out of him? But then that all goes along with how much you have to pay him. And where the Bills have been really strong, where Brandon Beane has excelled, is identifying these cases. With Diggs, he saw a player that he knew wanted out of Minnesota. He couldn't. Diggs was pretty public about that, even if he won't admit those specific words. In every roundabout way, he made it clear. Everyone sort of knew he wants out. Social, public media, and Beane on the record said, "I saw his tweets or his posts or whatever their staff saw. He saw that as an opening to say, hey, do you guys want to talk about a trade?" So that's how that happens when you identify it. Now this is different. This is not a trade. This is an open market guy who could fulfill a need. Will the price be right for the cap being where it is? I know this team wants to go down the road of doing a long-term deal with Josh Allen, and I'm sure they will sooner rather than later. So everything has to fit. But sure, it could happen. And rumor-wise, I don't put that in the. To me, a rumor is he's signed, it's done,
sure.
or he's about to sign. And where did it come from? Where's the information? You this day and age, you have to pay attention to everything that's out there. And then vet it. Is it credible? Does it have, and I know there's and I say this lovingly and laughingly because I've known him forever, but Adam Schefter and I go back many years when he was, working in Denver, and I had the pleasure of helping with his getting his first book deal that he did on Mike Shanahan using the same literary agent I had, and we were, we've been close even before that, but we had that bond, and he's the guy you can talk to on a regular basis, whatever. And I know the Adam Schefter test of things is, if Adam says it, it's probably happening. So you give something that sort of test. He takes the occasional 5-minute vacation, but he's usually on all the time. And I don't do what he does by any extent. And I know his deal is talking to everybody 24/7. Never sleep, and he's plugged in everywhere, sure. and he's great at what he does. So I haven't seen that yet, but if I saw something like that, regardless of the story, and it involves the Bills, you say, okay, there's something here you better get to.
So you talked about Sean McDermott building the culture and how J.J. Watt would fit and all that stuff. But from your perspective, how has your job changed with Sean McDermott coming in and creating this inclusive culture? Has it made it easier for you to report on, or is it less exciting because you don't get those oddball players that don't fit?
Well, look, great talkers are just that. You always enjoy. You want players to be themselves, and you want them to be characters. And again, I have to guard against saying, back in the day, everybody had their guard down. We could walk in the locker room, and you had Fred Smerlas, who we did a book together. He was great. You could say anything. Very chatty guys back in that Super Bowl run. Steve Tasker, Kelly would do something, say something. You'd have Thurman, Andre, you go down the list. Ken Hall was just a quote machine. And you could walk in that locker room and spend, it seemed like forever in there. I don't know that there were even time limits. Long before Sean arrived, the league became very much an appointment deal with media, right? Okay. A very limited time. Very homogenized, very sanitized, I should say, more than homogenized, but I guess it's homogenized as well. But then it became much more commodity reporting, and obviously that's not going to be your best stuff or your most interesting stuff. Anything that you generally see writers do that win awards, that's because they got a lot of people on their own and alone. It's not from the group sessions.
Sure.
So to your point about difficulty, I wouldn't call it difficulty, but I would say there's a tone a coach generally sets with his team. But even you had the loosest guy you've had in recent years was who? Rex, yeah. Right, in terms of there were no rules then. Everybody felt he could speak his mind and did. And you'd have a Sammy Watkins complain openly about not getting enough passes. You know where that got Sammy? It got him traded.
Right.
Because when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane came in, Sean said, I don't want that guy on this team. I don't want a guy that says throw me the ball more, and I demands it more, and make sure he tells the media his agenda. You don't. How often are you seeing those kinds of comments or quotes or anything from this Bills team? You don't.
Right. Not at all.
And if you do, if it's like a beautiful melody, and then there's that sour note that comes into it. That's how Sean or Brandon Beane would hear that.
It's the whole dynamic is different now opposed to then, but it also brings in a question that I have for you is regarding your questioning, not you specifically, but the media in general. When McDermott first showed up, it was the same generic answers for about the first year and a half, and WGR 550 after the conference were like, well, you heard it here first, so there isn't a change, and we're just going to move on. And they were actually like annoyed with it. So for you guys, is there any norms or customs or underlying rules for questions that you ask? And I'm sure it comes with like time in the industry and things, but is there like, come on, man, like you're the new reporter, you don't ask that kind of a question? Or, I mean, I'm sure you pick up what I'm trying to say, but. Yeah,
I hear what you're saying. This is my philosophy on questioning, on asking a question in whatever setting. You're trying to elicit a response. If it's so, you're going to say duh, but it's the response has got to be something, I think, meaningful. Mm-hmm. So avoiding a yes/no question, how do you go about that? So you condition yourself. You ask more like how and what and why, right? But you don't, do you think will get you almost nowhere.
Right.
Are you concerned? And asking a head coach of an NFL team or of almost any team, if he's concerned about anything, he's concerned about everything. His life is one big concern. Right. And I want to say Sean said that at one point, said that there's almost nothing I'm not going to. Head coaches are just different cats, man. Mm-hmm. They go to bed concerned, they wake up concerned, they look outside, that's a concern. They look at a snowdrift like I'm looking at now, there's something wrong with that snowdrift. That's how they think. That's how they're conditioned. Mm-hmm. So it's how you frame questions. Now, I'll give you an example since you brought this up. And I caught a bit, I wouldn't say the ire, but I definitely caught Sean about the only time I can remember since, and I knew Sean before he arrived here. I considered him someone with whom I could communicate at like the combine when he was actually going back to the Eagles, but especially when he was with Carolina. We'd spend time together. We just hit it off and talked football or talked life. Interesting guy. And when he got the job here, it was we as he was going about the process, we spoke. We were in touch. And I know his agent very well, Bob Lamont. But anyway, he after the Arizona game, after the Hail Murray play, there was a long gap before he was available, which is generally the case with Sean. He's usually the very last guy on these Zoom calls, and that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, sure. Sean obviously who wasn't just from the Bills, who wasn't in this bad place over that play? And I had a long time to ponder the question of this last play, this moment, because this is the game, this right? And we all basically knew, I say we, the three of us and anyone who's watching that game, what did we know that should have happened? Knock the ball down, right? Get the knockdown, right? And that should have been the design of what they were doing. And you could watch it a million times and you don't get that sense that everybody who was involved in that play, including Jordan coming in at the very last second, was really, that was more of a that way than the volleyball knockdown that we, knock it down, right?
Right.
Yep.
The Sperman thing, Tom Jack. Okay. So how am I going to get him to say, I wanted to say something other than, of course, or yeah, or whatever. Should they have knocked it down? Should they have? Because if you phrase it that way, that's what you're going to get.
Right.
If you did anything. And I was racking my brain. Okay. And Sean finally emerges, and there were very few hands up in the Zoom room when he, so yours truly puts that hand up there. Gonna get this. So I came up with my strategy. My strategy was, Was there anything different that you wanted to see your team do in that situation?
I mean, that's a fair question for him.
Forcing something other than a yes/no.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he's raw. And that wound is wide open and bleeding, and it's like you might as well have been putting salt, vinegar, whatever you could imagine into that wound. But I went for it, thinking whatever. I'd at least get something better than yes or obvious. He started with, well, of course. Well, Vic, you've covered this game a long time. And I could see him getting hotter and hotter. But I'm waiting for the words, and he says, you should be knocking the ball down. He said that.
Right.
He said that. It's some variation of that, but that's what he said. You want to knock the ball down. Boom. Got it. That's all I wanted. I know he wasn't a happy camper. I think the week before, or 10 days or so before, he saw in my background, I had a little sign wishing my granddaughter, Emma, a happy birthday. And I think he noticed it on the Zoom. And he said, is Emma, is that your granddaughter? Can you tell her happy birthday? I mean, just a week before, he's wishing my granddaughter a happy birthday.
Yeah.
So that's jovial, Sean. After the Arizona game, not so jovial. Sean, like, there was fire breathing.
Yeah. We want to be very conscious of your time. We know that you're a busy person. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this past year, football season, Mike and I both, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people too, we had this expectation or this hope that the Bills would at least get to the playoffs again and win one playoff game. And they far obviously passed that expectation. So from your perspective, what is your expectation, or what milestone do you want to see the Bills reach this year, if any? Do you guys talk about that?
Yeah, well, sure. Look, you're measuring. Everything is a measurement in sports, and you're measuring a standard. What was the standard last year? Get past the wild card round, which I think it was fair to say that we watched that game and said they won that game. They found a way to lose that game. So I thought of last year as a team being good enough to at least have played 2 games and should have played 2 games. And I give a lot of credit to the Texans, especially Deshaun Watson. You talk about the proverbial put the team on your back, and 7 sacks and however many hits he was in dealing with from the Bills defense, and it still wasn't enough to allow the Bills to protect a 16-point lead. Sure. It all just evaporated. We know what happened. And then it was the Josh Allen sort of unraveling game, right?
Yeah.
So we saw him come a long way, and that game definitely fueled him into one of the hardest working off seasons that I think a quarterback
or you
could have to bring himself to that point. So he was going to not let games like that get away ever again. That was his mandate. He plays well, certainly well enough against Indianapolis. Solid defense that day. I don't know that the Bills played great that day. They were certainly good enough, and Phillip Rivers had a chance at the end. We know that, but
we knocked it down.
They survived that one. Next week was obviously Baltimore, and that was an ugly defensive struggle. Josh, the offense that we saw and were so enraptured, didn't look anything like that in that game. And then we know what happened against Kansas City. But the standard's higher, for sure. The team is better. The team was good enough to be a Super Bowl team. Josh was good enough to be in the conversation for MVP. And I did vote. I have a vote, and I voted. I was one of those 4 votes. And I don't consider it a homer vote. I thought he legitimately, remember, that vote is based on the regular season.
Sure.
And in the regular season, I thought he had MVP credentials. I didn't say he towered above Aaron Rodgers, but I put him ahead of him, and I put him ahead of Patrick Mahomes. And I had it 1, 2, 3 that way instead of how it ended up with Rodgers, Allen, and Mahomes. But the defense was not what we saw a year ago or in 2019. Certainly, that is where when we talk about the need, whether it's going to come from a J.J. Watt or the draft or somewhere, get better, get pressure. The cornerback situation opposite Tre'Davious White, linebacking, however they sort that out, and with or without Matt Milano, it's got to get better. So you can identify, and then the need for back on the offense, tight end help.
Yes. running back.
The O-line can certainly do a better job. The running game's got to be present. I mean, it doesn't. I know they were a pass-first team and sprinkling the run, but you do that not because you don't care about the run. You do that because you don't have confidence in your ability to run. And I think that's what showed up as much as anything from Brian Daboll's play calling. Even though he took advantage of the best thing he had, I know he wanted more balance, and they've got to have that. So we identify those areas, not to say if they don't address them, they're going to be a lousy team. No, they're really good. That can make them great. That can put them where they need to get. And it's a big leap of faith to say Kansas City's the standard and they have to be better than Kansas City. That's going above and beyond. They're better than they're better than that. I don't mean better than Kansas City, but in the sense that what they were in that playoff game is what they were. And yes, they lost to them twice in a row. But the standard for 2021 has to be your best self, better than you were in 2020. And we know what that list includes. They're probably not going to hit everything on it. Right. They should be able to hit more than enough of those. And then see where that gets you. Does Kansas City take because they're trying to get better too, or do they take a step back? Super Bowls and back-to-back Super Bowls can be a problem. You have a harder time hanging on to people. Your mindset changes. A lot of things happen. So the hunger is there, but to your point, do I expect them to be better? Yes, but we'll have to revisit the conversation when we get into the season or after the offseason and discuss what did they do?
Sure.
What were the moves they made?
Awesome.
Or not.
Right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. We could literally talk for hours.
Yeah.
Especially because you expand on every question. Yeah. So thank you.
We also do ask better questions.
You guys, this is fun. I enjoy doing this. I love, and my family gives me some crap because you go around to, whatever, a restaurant or somebody wants to talk football, but what else is there for me? What else is there to
right.
We should talk ball.
Yeah.
That's what we do. That's what you could, I'm not going to talk about the stock market. I know nothing about that stuff. I'm certainly not going to talk politics, but I will talk, we'll talk football till the cows.
Yeah. And he already said that we'll touch base after the offseason. So we'll put you on the calendar. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I have a feeling it's going to be a very busy offseason for you.
I think it will. For a lot of, certainly for a lot of Bill's media and the team and Brandon. I'll put it this way: Brandon Green and Sean McDermott. They're going to earn those. They're going to earn those contract extensions.
Sure. Oh, no doubt.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
All right, guys. My pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.